All right, welcome back to another Brave Campus Webinar Wednesday, everyone. Can you guys all hear me? Just type it in the chat to make sure. Maybe. Yes, perfect. Thanks, Jennifer. All right, so I know that this is the time of year where orientation is happening and students are coming in and your life gets a little or a lot crazy. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to spend with us, even if it's just running in the background. Today we are talking about the art of meaningful conversation with Andrew Horn, who is up in the corner there. This conversation is so important to have to foster a sense of community on campus, especially with all of the new students that are coming in the next couple weeks. We're all so digitally connected, but on a personal level, we're almost more disconnected than ever. A little bit about Andrew. He is the co-founder of Tribute, which is this really awesome website, if you've never heard of it before, that does video montages from a different group of people that want to celebrate someone or appreciate them. So without further ado, live from Brooklyn, New York, I'm going to pass it over to Andrew. There we go.
Thanks so much, Lexi. All right, I'll just do a quick check as well. Can everyone hear me? Make sure the levels are all good. Boom, thank you so much, Austin. Rock and roll. You guys, so first of all, thank you for taking the time to join today. I appreciate you taking some time out of the middle of your day to be here. And so before we dive in, I really want to make you guys a promise, and that is that we're not going to kind of sit here today and listen to me talk for the next hour. Really what I want to do here is give you a quick backstory about where this body of work comes from. I want to introduce some statistics that really speak to the immediacy of the importance of meaningful communication, as well as the really massive rise in social anxiety and depression amongst people under 25 to really showcase why this is super important. Everything that we do today is going to be couched in tangible takeaways. So these are sets of questions that you are going to be able to ask yourself to basically kind of manifest meaningful conversation in your own life. We're also going to give you some really powerful systems that you can use to foster more meaningful dialogues within your own community, within student groups on your campus. And then last but not least, we're going to cut this thing really early so that we can dig right into questions and really speak to exactly what's most important to you guys. How's that sound? Awesome. So, thanks so much, Aaron. So a quick backstory. So right now I'm the founder of Tribute.co, and Tribute was inspired by a really powerful gift I received 3 years ago. It was my 27th birthday, and my girlfriend decided to invite 25 of my closest friends and family members to submit a 1-minute video telling me why they love me. When I got home that night, she surprised me with it, and I sat in the back of the room watching this 25-minute video of all the people closest to me telling me why they love me. Within the last 2 minutes, first 2 minutes, I was in the back of the room bawling my eyes out. It was the most powerful thing that I'd ever experienced. And I was so inspired by that after hearing how difficult it was for her to create it that we built Tribute.co. And so Tribute is now our platform that makes it easy to build those video montages in 15 minutes instead of 15 hours. And so we just went over the 100,000 user mark. We've given over 10,000 of these. We're working with great organizations like Susan G. Komen, like the Cleveland Clinic, like Caribou Coffee, all sorts of universities as well, to help communities of people celebrate their members, celebrate the people that they care about. So that's a little background on Tribute. And I always think that's funny that I get to talk about the art of meaningful conversation with organizations and people all over the world, because I would have been the last person on the planet you would have expected to do that in my younger days. As far back as I can remember, I struggled with social anxiety and shyness. So much so that one of my last memories growing up in Hawaii was of my 8th grade dance. And I somehow got my big crush, Haley, to go to the dance with me. So I asked her to the dance, but I didn't talk to her until we actually got to the dance. And when we actually got there, I was so afraid of going and dancing with her and talking to her that I hid in the bathroom for the entire dance and avoided her until the very last song. And I will always remember the very last song, which was Casey and JoJo, All My Life. So now I have terrible memories every time I hear that song. And that kind of anxiety persisted through high school into college. It's, you know, I got a little more engaged in philanthropy and my fraternity, but I still always had that critical internal dialogue. I was afraid to raise my hands. I was afraid to really speak up, terrified of public speaking. And right after graduating from college, I was inspired by the power of service, and I ended up starting my first organization called Dreams for Kids. And there was one catalytic moment where I had been running this organization for a year, and I was invited to this this conference called Summit Series. And Summit Series brings together leaders from all over the world in the world of entertainment, business, education, the arts. And I was going to this event, and I had been basically comped access because of the work that I was doing with this organization called Dreams for Kids I had founded that helps young people with disabilities to play sports, to unite with their peers. And I'll always remember that the first event that I was invited to at Summit Series was called a nonprofit pitch-off, where I walked into this room, and to my surprise, there were 30 tables. So 30 tables, and on the outside were philanthropists, were major philanthropic donors. And on the inside was me and other nonprofiteers who were all pitching to these investors. It was in that moment that I recognized the power of this moment, that these were people who could literally make or break my new nonprofit, who could give us the money that we needed so that I could go full-time and quit my day job, start this nonprofit. When I sat down, even though I was prepared, I remember sitting there and starting into my pitch and being so nervous that I felt this bead of sweat just drip right off my forehead and literally seeing it landing on the table. I was petrified. I was so in my head that I completely bumbled the words. I forgot my pitch, and that went on for each of those 30 talks. These were literally the people who could make or break my nonprofit, and I was going around bumbling, forgetting my pitch, blowing my major shot. When I got home that night, I was so dejected, so down on myself, that I literally didn't even think I was going to go back to the conference. Mind you, this was like my opportunity to make it, to make this nonprofit, my passion project, real. And so it was only at like 12 o'clock, 1 a.m. in the morning that I was literally getting ready to go to bed, and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I had worked so hard for this organization. I had helped. I see one person who says that the video's gone. Are we good, everyone else? Looks like we're still good, so I'm going to keep going. Not only did I realize how long I had been working on this project, but I thought about the families that we had impacted, the kids who were getting an opportunity to play sports for the first time. And I realized that I owed it to myself, I owed it to them to go back to this event. And I'm always happy that I did, because I went back the next day, and one of the first people that I met was a man named Yannick Silver. And I was so exhausted from talking about myself that one of the first things that I asked him was an unorthodox question. I said, "What do you do for fun?" And he told me that he plays ice hockey. And I said, well, it's a coincidence because we're doing our clinic with the Washington Capitals tomorrow. And that's a clinic that brings together 100 young people with disabilities so they can play sports with the Capitals at the center where they play their actual games. So Yannick ended up coming out, brought his son. He was so impacted by it that he ended up becoming our first major donor. He gave us the first grant that allowed me to go full-time with Dreams for Kids, and I never looked back. But that was a catalytic moment where I realized that if I was going to allow myself to be limited by this shyness, if I was unable to articulate my ideas about the things that I care about, I was limiting not only the success of my business, but I was limiting my friends. I was limiting romantic partners. I was limiting the relationships that could let me live a full life. And so that's when I committed to researching all of the best practices around effective communication, around human connection, about what we can do as people to connect deeply and live our best life. And so I never would have thought that that would have led to me starting the Intrigue Agency, a global strategic communication firm.
It looks like we lost your video there for a second. Your icon is up, so you can keep talking if you want, but just a heads up that we don't have your video right now.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. I'm going to go ahead and keep talking, and hopefully that comes back in. Put the audio, video. Let me know if something comes back. Yeah, it looks like we're still okay with some of those guys, so I'm going to keep going. And so what that led to was not only the Intrigue Agency, our strategic communications firm that works with Fortune 500 leaders at Intel, Cisco, Boeing to craft TEDx talks, but it also helped me to start not only Dreams for Kids and raise several $1 million to sustain that organization, Ability List, my Craigslist for people with disabilities platform that still exists in DC and New York, and now Tribute, which is what we're calling Hallmark 2.0. And so that's a little bit of the backstory of where we've come to today. And what we want to get into is now the art of meaningful conversation. And for most of you who are on campus, who are dealing with young people, I want to share a quick story to couch this in why this is so important. So Stanford recently released a study. So they had looked at their graduate students over the past 30 years, and they were looking for the attributes, the characteristics that could predict the success. So these are graduates who are coming out of Stanford, so obviously a very selective group of people to begin with. But after looking at all the data, all the technical criteria, what they had decided to do with their careers, they said that there was only one consistent variable that could predict success. Can you guys guess what that was? It was something called verbal fluency. So verbal fluency, the ability to articulate our ideas, to influence others. That was the one predictor of future success from 30 years of Stanford graduates. And then you have the Rockefeller study that influenced almost all of Dale Carnegie's work. That said that when they were looking at engineers, their success was determined by 15% of their technical ability, and 85% was their human engineering ability, their ability to connect and influence other people. So if we are invested in the success of our students, we need to give them the tools to be verbally fluent, to communicate, to connect with other people. And then on top of that, we are in the midst of a connection crisis. So the American Sociological Review recently did a study, and it was really shocking and eye-opening for me. So in 1985, they did a study called the Close Confidant Study. What they asked people is they said, how many friends, close friends do you have? These are people that you can be completely honest with. So in 1985, that number was 3. We did that study again in 2010, and the number had dropped to just 1. So just 1 close friend. But the really shocking statistic that came out in that study is that 33% of all people said that they had not a single close friend. Not a single close friend. And on top of that, we're seeing social anxiety at levels of girls under the age of 25 at 50%, young men at 47%, and that's just for social anxiety and shyness. So when you look at the America, Canada as a whole, it's around 60% of people who identify as struggling with social anxiety or shyness. And again, guys, we need to be verbally fluent to succeed in business, and relationships, as determined by Harvard's 75-year study on happiness, are literally the most important ingredient of a happy life. And if you want to look at that, watch Robert L. Waldinger's TED Talk on happiness. It's incredible, enlightening, and speaks to the power of relationships. So now I want to dig into these actual techniques. And as we go through these, guys, I would love if you asked any questions, if you wanted me to stop, if you wanted me to clarify anything, we can absolutely do that. So what we're going to do is dig right into what we call FAM. So FAM is the art of meaningful conversation. So F, find your authentic voice. A, ask better questions. And M is the metamorphic 2-step for confidence. So it's a little hypnosis that anyone can use to be more confident in any situation. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to move into some tools that you can use within student groups to unify the conversation and foster more meaningful dialogues. So number 1 is to find your authentic voice. So as I talked about, my entire life, I struggled with shyness. I struggled with some of the social anxiety, an inability to be comfortable in social situations. And so I will never forget when I was 20 years old, I was at an event called Renaissance Weekend, which is not a Renaissance fair, as many people have guessed in the past. Renaissance Weekend is this amazing event that brings together thought leaders from a variety of industries in Charleston, South Carolina. And everyone at that event has to give a talk on something that they're an expert on. I somehow managed to hide from that part of the event. But one of the last events that I went, one of the last sessions I went to there was a panel called A Life Well Lived. And at a panel called A Life Well Lived, they had athletes, entertainers, senators, and last but not least, there was a guy named Steve Robbins. And when they went through the panel, there were all these people talking about their life advice, how they've lived a life well lived. And it was about family, and it was about hard work, and it was about all these other things that had never really connected with me, that had never really lit that fire below me and given me the confidence to pursue my dreams. And when Steve stood up, I'll never forget it. He stands up and he has this bright orange hair and these like Harry Potter glasses. And he just says, some of you will wake up tomorrow and you will ask yourself, have I lived a life well lived? And then he pauses and he said, some of you will wake up 10 years from now and ask yourself, have I lived a life well lived? Which one would you rather be? And so as a 20-year-old with no passion, no purpose, what I took from that statement was that if you can't answer the questions of what you're passionate about or what you care about, is that they're not going to go away. And I had a chance to answer that at 20, or I had an opportunity to answer it at 30. And it was my choice about when I was going to answer it. And so I was so fortunate to be able to take him out to dinner later that night. And for one of the first times in my life, we were having a conversation, and Steve was one of the first people who just looked me deeply in the eyes, and he just said, "So what are you passionate about?" And I sat there, and my first answers were, I'm passionate about making money, I'm passionate about women, and I'm passionate about partying. And he laughed. And what he then did is he went deeper, and he gave me a construct to evaluate the question. And he said, do you know the difference between happiness and pleasure? He said, happiness is that which is long-lasting and fulfilling. Those kind feelings stay with us for days, weeks, months after we've experienced it. He said, pleasure is that which is exciting, but ultimately fleeting. What I realized in that moment is that I had a lot of pleasure in my life, but not a lot of happiness. So what Steve did with that one pointed question, with his support, his commitment to help me answer that, was provided a platform for me to start doing that introspection for myself. And one thing that I know is that the greatest teachers are the greatest question askers. They are not the people who tell us how to live our life. They are the people who provide us with the questions to help us figure it out for ourselves. And so this is about finding your authentic voice. If we want to show up in the world, if we want to connect with people, if we want confidence, before we think about others, we need to first establish a foundation of who we are, about what we care about what we want to do in the world. And so to do that, we have to start asking ourselves better questions. And so what I want to do is I'm going to give you guys a quick sheet here. And if you guys want to screen grab this, you can go ahead and do that. Can you guys see my screen share? Perfect. So here are the how to find your authentic voice questions. And again, what you get to do with this is for yourself. Take a deep dive. These 5 questions will provide you with a foundation of what is happening right now and where am I headed in a deep, meaningful way. And what's powerful about these questions is that, again, if you don't have answers to them right now, that actually is your answer. This is your starting point. But that providing yourself a platform to go in, understand where you are on this plane, will be the foundation that you will show up with in the world. So these are the how to find your authentic voice. You guys want to screen grab those? You have these. This is a powerful exercise. Again, one of the things that we do, guys, when we have questions, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but it is the unifying of the conversation. Is that when we put questions in front of an audience, what happens is that we become conversation catalysts. We normalize this kind of introspection. Because I remember sometimes when I was younger, when I was in college, when I was in high school, to ask these kinds of deep introspective questions was a little bit emotional. It could be awkward. Did the other person actually want to go there? Were they capable of it? But as leaders, as conversation catalysts, we can normalize this type of dialogue with questions. And before a meeting, before we're getting ready for an event, if we say, here are the questions that we want you to think about before you get here. Here are the questions that we're asking instead of what do, you provide a platform and a positive peer pressure for people to ask these questions that will allow them to articulate their authentic voice. Does that make sense? Perfect. All right, cool. So after we've found our authentic voice, the next step is actually about asking better questions. And so asking better questions, one thing that we can always trust, and I want you guys to really embrace this as leaders yourselves, and something that you can pass along to students, is that any time that you are in conversation, if you are asking questions that you care about and listening intently, you are doing 2 things. Number 1, you are always making your counterpart feel valued. Think about the last time someone asked you a question and then listened. How did it feel? You felt valued, you felt seen. So number 1, you will always make your counterpart feel valued when you are asking questions. And second, when you are asking questions, you are learning. And learning is always a pathway to growth, to transformation, to fulfillment. So anytime that you are asking questions, you can just silence that internal dialogue of question of how I'm being perceived and just focus on that truth, that you are making your counterpart feel valued and you are learning. So questions are the path to silencing that internal dialogue and to personal growth. So questions are always okay. And again, I think it was the Dalai Lama who says that when you are talking, you are merely repeating what you know. But when you listen, you will learn something new. And one of my favorite constructs to give people is basically what I call the golden rule of question asking. And that is, ask people questions that you would want to be asked yourself. I want to repeat that again. The golden rule of questions is to ask people questions you would want to be asked yourself. So ask yourself, do I want to be asked, what do I do? Do I want to be asked, where am I from? Do I want to be asked what I had for lunch? What I did last weekend? Maybe you do, but I'm going to guess that you don't. I'm going to guess that you want a little bit more why. And so to really get to the core of that, there's one question. And you guys, this applies to any social interaction you or any of your students will ever enter into. Whether that is with a mentor, whether that is a date. Ask yourself this one question. What do I most want to learn about the person I'm going to meet? And that's worth writing down. What do I most want to learn about the person I am going to meet? And what you will find is that you don't just know these things, you need to write it down. Is that when you take the time to articulate your curiosity, you have a compass for connection. Is that these are questions that you would want to be asked yourself. That's genuine, authentic curiosity for this person. So whether this is, again, an employer, a date, whoever it may be, that one question will provide a virtuous path to connection. What am I most excited to learn about this person? That's a 60-second exercise before any social interaction that will lead you towards connection. So what I also want to give you guys is a little bit of what we call our go-to questions. I'm going to screen share with you for a second so you can take a screen grab of this if you'd like. And these are the go-to questions. So again, this is an opportunity for us to ask people questions that we would want to ask ourselves or answer ourselves. And these are 5 that we've crafted and that we've tested over time, but you can develop your own. And essentially what this is when you think about great athletes, one of the reasons that they get into the zone is because they have practiced so much that when a hitter is standing in the batter's box and they're looking at a 90-mile-per-hour fastball, they are not thinking about hitting when they're hitting. They are just hitting. And so when we actually understand these questions that we generally want to ask all the time, what happens is we'll start to do this naturally. So these are the things that we actually want to jog into our memory so we can pull these up in any situation. So these are the go-to questions, 5 of our favorites. You guys can put right there. All right, so we have one more of our core techniques, and then I want to open up for a few questions on any of these, and then we'll get into some of the more group dynamics, how to unify the conversation within our student organizations, foster more meaningful dialogues. So number 3 is all about confidence. So I met a guy named Andrew Kippen in New York about a year ago. So I found out that Andrew is a hypnotherapist. So he works with companies like Boeing and Google performance. And so when I met him, I cornered him and I said, I'm going to ask you 1,000 questions right now. Is that okay? And he was like, yeah, sure. And so my first question that I asked him was, what is the number one I first asked was smoking, and then it was overeating. And he laughed and he said no. And they told me that the number one thing that hypnotherapists globally are asked to get rid of, limiting beliefs, self-doubt, that critical internal dialogue that we talked about before. So I said, wow. So I said, if the number one thing people want to get rid of are limiting beliefs, how would you do that? And he introduced something to me called the metamorphic 2-step. And so the metamorphic two-step is simple. And this is something that, again, that you can provide to students who are talking about any sort of shyness or social anxiety before, let's say, an interview, which I certainly struggled with when I was 21 years old, and sitting down with interviews with people that I really wanted to impress, that I really cared about what they thought of me, how they perceived me. So the metamorphic two-step starts with number 1. Looks like we're having a few people here with video issues. I'm going to pause for 1 second, guys. Okay, yeah, it looks like, did we get it back on? Can I get a little confirmation from you guys if it went back on? It looks like it's showing up for me again. Okay, cool, so we're still here. All right, so we're at the metamorphic two-step. Perfect. So the metamorphic two-step, step number 1, you need to articulate the fear, the undesired state of being. So again, let's use a student who's getting ready to sit down in an interview with a representative from Lockheed Martin on campus. So the fear that they may have in their head, they get that out, is they're not going to think that I'm experienced enough. I'm not going to know what to say. They're not going to think that I'm funny, or they're going to think that I have oily skin or I'm sweating. So here are all the fears. And what you do is you actually write that down. You give those fears a voice. So that's step 1. You just write down, what are all the things that I'm potentially afraid of? What could go wrong? Make that real. And then the second step is that you have to articulate the desired state of being. Because you see, our brains are really good at telling us what is going to go wrong. Because our brains have one primary function above everything else. That is to keep us safe. More so than they're wanting to connect. And so what we need to do is anchor the desired state of being, how I want to feel, so that we can focus on those things. So let's go back to that student who's interviewing with the person at Lockheed Martin. So before they step into that room, before they go to that interviewing event, what they're going to do is say, how are the 3 ways that I want to feel? So if I'm getting ready for this event, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I want to be confident, I want to be articulate, and I want to be light. I want to be happy. So confident, articulate, and light. CAL. So now I have this acronym. So anytime my brain goes back to some of that self-doubt of not being experienced, whatever it is, now my brain has that anchor of the desired state of being. I want to be confident, I want to be articulate, and I want to be light. And what happens is when we think about the ways that we would like to be in the world, we act that way. And the counter is also true. When we think about how we don't want to be or what we're scared of, guess what we do? It happens. So that is the metamorphic two-step for confidence. And so that's FAM. Find your authentic voice. We ask ourselves those questions. Ask better questions. What am I most excited to learn about this person? And the metamorphic two-step. What is the undesired state? What is the desired state? One thing that I will close on here, and one thing that is vital to this entire process working, is the art of listening. And I don't just want to tell you that you need to tell people to listen, that you need to listen. I'm going to give you a construct that you or anyone you know can use to become an active listener. And it's something called the take versus turn methodology. What you will find is that in every conversation, you have an opportunity to take the conversation or to turn it back. So I'm going to give you another example. A student comes in and he tells you about an amazing vacation. He just went to Thailand, and he went to the north, and he went to the south. And so here's what taking that conversation is like. I just went to Thailand, did all this great stuff. Oh, that's amazing. I went to Thailand 3 years ago. We went to the south. The beaches were amazing. We had this great surf instructor. Do you see what you've just done? Is that you didn't acknowledge anything that person said. You've taken that back to talk about yourself. So now I'm going to show you what a great conversationalist does. They turn the conversation back. And so what happens now is when that person tells me about their trip to Thailand, rather than telling about my vacation, what I get to say to them is, oh, that's amazing. How was the South? Did you guys do any surfing? What was your favorite part? And what happens is that you can turn the conversation back, always. And that's what leads to real depth. It's never our first question that is really what we want to ask. It's on the second and third questions that we find the authenticity, the depth, the emotion. And so if you want to practice active listening, you can watch yourself in any conversation. Are you taking the conversation, or are you turning it back? So what I'd love to do is to open up to any questions that you guys might have right now, just as a little break from me talking. And then what I want to do is focus on group dialogues, is with our student organizations, with our own departments within the school. How do we foster more meaningful dialogues? How do we unify the conversation? So are there any questions? Anyone want me to refine anything from the F, from the A, from the M? And Lexi, if there's a better way to do this, just let me know.
I think we are all good here. If anyone has any questions, just post them in the chat now. But I think we are good to move on if everyone's good so far.
All right, cool. So you guys, I told you about my experience with Stever, about him being the first person to ask me this deep introspective question and to give me that support and that motivation to dive in, to dig deeper, to really pursue that and find my own answers. And as leaders, one of the biggest opportunities that we have is to provide a platform, meaningful conversation for our students. And what I want to talk about now are what are the simple ways that we can do that? And what are the constructs that we can really integrate very simply that lead to more meaningful dialogues? And a lot of these lessons come from my time with Tribute. You know, again, the whole mission of the organization is to help people share their gratitude and connect deeply with the people that they care about. And so one of the things that we do with Tribute is, let's say that it's Lexi's birthday and we all want to share a video for her. I can invite 20 of her friends to come and actually share a video, but they wouldn't necessarily know what to say. Do they just say happy birthday? Do they say something funny? But what happens when you introduce a question, what we call a prompt, is that now you empower everyone to tap into an internal answer that is more emotional and authentic. So when we're sharing our appreciation for Lexi, when we're submitting a video, it's not submit a video for Lexi, it is what's your favorite thing about Lexi? It is what's your favorite memory with Lexi? So now you've done a few things. You've used the power of the prompt, so you've already planted an internal, emotional, authentic response inside of someone. And what you've also introduced is what we call positive peer pressure, is that you have normalized this conversation in such a way by showing everyone in the group that here is what we're going to explore. Here is how we are going to communicate. And so this works in two ways. It works whenever we're having meaningful conversations. So if we're getting everyone back together for orientation, I'll use an example from a friend here in New York, my friend Matt Breimer, who started a company called General Assembly, international education organization startup. And they would host these parties called heartbeat parties. And the whole emphasis of these parties, and they had signs everywhere, is that we don't talk about our day job. What we do talk about is our passion. And so they just had one question up and it said, what are you passionate about? And when everyone came in, they just reminded everyone there. They said, we don't talk about our jobs here, we talk about our passions. And what they've done is that they've normalized that deeper, more meaningful conversation. And that's one of the simplest things that can do. If we just do that at the beginning of a meeting, at the beginning of an event, what you've done is set the playing field for more meaningful conversation, more meaningful connection that you could ever do as an individual speaker or leader. You are going to connect people in conversations that will deepen those relationships forever, that will allow them to explore those things for themselves. And you guys, when we can set the platform for young people to do that kind of introspection on their own, they will look back at us positively. They will remember us as the catalyst, as the leaders who helped us get them there. So that's why unifying the conversation with questions, providing them at the beginning of events, is such a powerful tool that we can use to help people connect in more meaningful ways. Any questions about how to unify the conversation, how to help people kind of share their gratitude amongst groups? Cool, moving on. And one thing that I'd be really curious actually to talk about, but also to hear your opinions on here, is that we're obviously in a very sensitive time about conversation on campus, about sensitivity, about students feeling safe, about students being triggered. And one of the things that I love talking about when it comes to the art of meaningful conversation is how important it is to shift our relationship to discomfort. How do we have difficult conversations? How do we have conversations with people that we disagree with? And let's think about the word discomfort for a second. And the thing about discomfort is that a lot of times we think about discomfort as a negative thing. It's that we want to avoid that. If something makes us uncomfortable, we want to avoid it, we want to escape it, we don't want to be around it. But the reality about discomfort is that it is an integral part for connection. It's because when we are looking at someone face to face, when we are having a conversation, especially with someone that we might not agree with, there's going to be discomfort. There's going to be the anxiety of the unknown, not knowing whether someone will agree with us, not knowing how what we'll say will come across. But that discomfort is not something we need to run away from. It's something that we need to embrace as a part of connection. And anytime we feel that, we need to lean into that and appreciate that those are the moments where we are likely going to be connecting with people. And there is a difference between discomfort and providing people with a safe, respectful environment. And when we foster these dialogues, what we want to talk about is that this is a safe place where we respect our peers, but discomfort is something that goes along with connecting. It's something as a part of this process. What are your guys' thoughts about actually having difficult conversations on campus and the line between discomfort and providing a safe space for people? I mean, Lexi, you guys are super active on campus. What's been your experience about kind of fostering dialogues and issues?
Ooh, let me pull up here. So it all really depends on who I'm talking to. So I speak to a lot of different college programmers, some are students, and geographically it really changes from area to area depending on the community culture and if it's a community college versus an Ivy League school. But everyone is still struggling with those difficult conversations, and with everything going on in the political state of America right now, especially right now in the recent events, there's a lot of hostility on campus that's not being said from what I've heard. People that are watching, if you want to type in the chat, is it the same for you? What are you guys experiencing?
And while you guys are typing some of your responses in there, Lexi, can you hear me when we're split screen like that, or do I need to? Okay, perfect. So one of the things that I really wanted to share here, and that you can introduce to students as well, is that a lot of times when we find ourselves in heated conversations, in situations where we disagree with someone, a lot of times our first instinct is to point out why that person is wrong. And if we disagree with someone, we obviously hold our opinion in higher esteem than theirs. Theirs must be wrong if mine is right. But science and research has actually proven this. And this is a really powerful thing to establish at the beginning of heated conversations, is that when we disagree with someone, if we point out why their opinion or their idea is wrong, it does not convince them to adopt our point of view. It literally strengthens and deepens their own belief. When someone is told why they are wrong, let's hear that again. When someone is told why their viewpoint, why their idea is wrong, statistically speaking, it deepens their belief in that standing, in that viewpoint. So what our goal should be in conversation is never to tell people while they are wrong. It is to introduce new viewpoints and new ways of doing things. Because when people are attacked, they will recede, they will pull away, they will grasp on to what they know. But what we can do in respectful discourse is not about proving someone wrong, it's about showing them other paths. It's about trying to understand why someone believes what they do. It's about asking questions. It's about opening ourselves up to other viewpoints while also thinking about our own. And so when you say that in the beginning, when you talk to students and you say, it is easy to tell someone why you think they are wrong, the master's path is to provide a different way of doing things. All you can do is introduce other ways of doing things, counterpoints, other ways for them to look at it. Because if your goal, again, is discourse and influencing people to potentially change their mind, that is how you do it. So again, setting the construct before you get into heated conversations for that, so that we're not attacking one another, but we are introducing new ideas, is how we can obtain that level of discourse as opposed to an unsafe environment where people are attacking one another.
And I think that that's a really valid point, especially for this group that's watching, as well for new students or new staff that are coming in that might not be used to what's been set in previous years. I know student governments and campus activity boards change over every single year with the way that things are run and who's running it because of the students leaving. But it's bringing up these new ideas and having that conversation that although the new person coming in may not agree with the ways things have been done. It's opening up and listening to what these new people have to say, because they might be bringing in these new and innovative ideas that you might not have heard of before.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And so that's one of the things that I wanted to introduce there again. Is I think that the two biggest things we can do to, again, unify the conversation with our communities, with our groups of students, is to be a conversation catalyst, is to actually provide questions before our meetings so that people are on the same plane, so that we normalize deep introspective conversations among people and trust that that is the path to transformation, to meaningful dialogues, to people coming up with their own answers in a way that they will resonate deeper than someone telling you how to do something. When you come to your own epiphany, that is when it sticks in your heart, when it's there, when it's lodged, and you can derive motivation from it consistently. So that's the first. And the second is to really establish what a respectful atmosphere for discourse is that we are not telling people why they are wrong, ever, even if we must know in our head that they're absolutely wrong. But by challenging them and telling them why they're wrong, you are just reaffirming their belief. So the master's path to discourse is that here we share alternative viewpoints. We share our ideas, because that's how we actually influence other people. So those two things are two tangible ways that you guys can have more effective group dialogues at your university. Perfect. And you guys, one of the last things that I want to give, and then we can move into questions if we want to tap people in here to dig into anything, is I'm going to pull up something on my screen called the Who Are You questions. And if any of you guys are bringing people back and you have icebreakers or any time with your students, again, a really tangible way to allow your students to connect with one another in a meaningful way is to give them a platform to go deep. And so here's something we've created called the Who Are You questions. I want to get that so you guys can screen grab it. And I'll also send it out to Lexi so that everyone here can get them. But these are the 10 questions that we have sent up that have led to more incredible conversations than we can count. And essentially what this does is it takes you through every aspect of a person's life. And the great part about these questions is that they are meaningful to anyone who answers them, and everyone has an answer. So each one of these questions are constructed in such a way that anyone will have an answer. And not only will they have an answer to it, but it will be couched in a story, so that someone can tell an authentic story about how this has happened to them or who the person was. And so these are the Who Are You questions. And if you guys are listening, I'm just going to share these with you in case you want to write any down, ask them to your partner, to your friend. So the Who Are You questions start with an intro. Tell us a story of impact that explains what you do. Dale Carnegie always said that when we deal with humans, we try to convince ourselves we're dealing with logical beings, when in fact we are dealing with emotional ones. So telling someone a story will always connect them deeper to you. Clarity. Voltaire would ask every person he ever connected with, what has become clear to you since last time we met? We are evolving beings. So when we just see someone, what has become clear to you since last time we met? You will get something insightful, something new for that person. Skill. What do you think you're best at, and how did you get that way? Pride. What is the last thing you've done that you are proud of? Asking people what they are proud of is oftentimes the easiest way to establish a window into what they care most about. 5, mentor. Who is a person that has been your most influential mentor? What did they teach you? Easy window into compelling lessons. 6 is struggle. And this is a really powerful one because oftentimes we shuck the conversation around challenge and struggle because we connotate it as bad, as negative. But you could be living the best life on the planet and completely happy. One thing I guarantee you is that you still have a struggle. And so that's one reframe that I really want to give to you guys today, is that challenge and struggle is ubiquitous for the human experience. And when we can provide the people we care about an opportunity to talk about their challenges, it will be incredibly relevant and appreciated by them. So that simple question of, what are you struggling with? What's the challenge? And in this case, what is the most significant struggle that you've overcome? This is probably the single best dinner conversation starter that I've ever encountered. So if you guys are ever sitting down and you want to unify the conversation with one, what is the most significant challenge you've overcome in your life? That one, or what is the one thing you've done that you're most proud of? Those are incredibly powerful at dinner tables. Community. How did you build your community of friends and confidants? Again, community, friends, quickest path to a happy life. Really important to talk about that. Book. What is the book that you have that has impacted your life the most? And if you guys want another fun icebreaker, this has been something incredible that we've done a few times now. If you have a small group of students or even within your own community, if you ever want an incredible icebreaker, send an email out to everyone in that group. And what you say is, I want everyone to just send me an email telling me their favorite book. And if you have the budget for it, what you should do, you buy every single one of those books. And without telling anyone what you're doing, you get everyone in a circle when you convene, and you lay out all the books in the middle. And then what you tell everyone is that, all right, so we're going to go around the circle and everyone gets to pick one book that they're going to read. And whenever you pick a book, the person who selected that book as their favorite book of all time has to explain why it's their favorite book. So what happens now is you're giving people an amazing gift with a great book, but everyone chose that book because it's deeply personal to them. It's inspired them in some way, so they can tell a story about themselves. So that's one of my favorite icebreakers if you guys ever needed something like that for your team or a student group. So 9, wisdom. This is a fun one, is that if you had a megaphone to go to 9 billion people, what would you want to say? What is the ultimate truth to you? What is most important? What's the lesson you'd want to share? And 10, what are you most grateful for? You know, and science has proven this, but that if you don't have time for gratitude, you don't have time for your best life. So providing our friends, our confidants, our peers, a platform to talk about gratitude is essential. And so we always close with that. So I'll send these to Lexi when we're done. And then I can also make some of the slides available from The Art of Meaningful Conversation. But we're at about 45 minutes, guys. And I think we can go ahead and stop it there. And if you have any questions, you want me to go through anything, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Andrew. Does anyone have any questions for Andrew? If so, just type them in the chat there. I have a couple questions. So for orientation, or let's say a new student group that's coming together for the first time, what would you say are 2 or 3 key things that the advisors should know to run an effective meeting with these guys?
Absolutely. So I think that, again, prepping people with, say, 1 or 2 questions to think about before they come back would be a powerful way to actually immediately drop people into meaningful conversation when they come back. So let's say that if we're going to orientation, if there's one email and the organizers just say, one thing we want to embrace this year is meaningful conversation. How do we move beyond what do you do and what's your major? And so one of the easiest ways to get young people talking about things that are a little more meaningful, a little deeper, is to talk about favorites. So if we just talk about, number 1, what was your favorite experience this summer? Everyone had a favorite experience. That's going to go immediately to something that was really compelling to them, that they're really excited about, that I guarantee you they want to talk about. So now we get to immediately review their entire year. So there's the review and then there's the preview. Is that let's let students talk about their goals with each other right away. And the way that we do that is by saying, what's your goal for the year? What's most important to you? What do you want to get done? So by allowing our students to drop in with one another and say, here's the review, what was my favorite experience of the summer? And then second, what's my goal this year at school? What's my priority? What's the number 1 thing I want to accomplish or get done? Because you see what happens is that when we get our students talking about their goals amongst one another, guess what happens? They can help one another to do those things. They know what their dream is. They know what they want to do. So that's probably one of the biggest things that I would do is, again, give people those prompts that normalize a deeper conversation ahead of time, and you're going to see your students spark into much, much better conversation.
Awesome. And then in terms of phones and technology, a lot of students are more keen on, I'm going to start texting people because I know absolutely no one here. How do you get them to put down their phone and engage in conversation?
It's a really valuable question, and one that we think about quite a lot. Is we really consider Tribute as part of what we call the digital intimacy movement. Is how do you leverage technology in mindful ways so that people are connecting rather than simply being connected? And there's a beautiful kind of Atlantic article that just came out that I'd recommend, and it is called Are Smartphones Destroying a Generation? And it talks about some of the really relevant statistics about social anxiety amongst people under the age of 20 And again, providing people with the understanding of their technology habits is a really, really powerful thing. And so what I would say in terms of helping people to really come to grips with their relationship with their phone is, again, if we want to have conversations about that, it's powerful, and oftentimes not one that we have. But rather than telling people, here's how you should be using your technology, we found that one of the most powerful conversations to have is simply asking people the question, what is your relationship with your device? What is your relationship with technology? And what happens is that, again, these devices, these technologies are built by the smartest people on the planet. That is a fact. And their goal, when you think about Facebook, when you think about Snapchat, when they design that app, they are not designing for your happiness. They are designing for time on site. And that is a fact. And so here's something that you can ask your students. Are you happier when you spend more time on Facebook or less time on Facebook in a day? And what do you think most people are going to say?
Less.
Less. And then what I would ask them again is, do you think that the engineers and designers at Facebook get bonuses when you spend more time or less time on Facebook?
More, absolutely.
Yeah. So there is a disconnect between what they are doing and how we want to use these things. So what we need to realize is that if we are not intentional, if we are not setting our own practices of here's where my phone goes when I come home, here's the line where my phone does not go into the bedroom, then the smartest people on the planet will be taking you along for a ride. And as these devices become more and more immersive, it's going to be more and more of a challenge. So I beg you, please open up that dialogue with your students and ask them, what is your relationship with technology? And what you're going to hear are these horror stories of people staying up until 3 and 4 a.m. in the morning who are hooked. And again, people who are so ingratiated into the lifestyle of, again, just validation of when so much of your life is tracked on the internet, you get conditioned to weighing your actions off the validation of others. And so another really powerful construct here that I would give to help people construct their, sorry, I have so many thoughts about this. There's another one here where it's the idea of internal versus external. And this is a construct that, again, you can give to students rather than telling them, don't do this and don't do that, because they won't listen to that. But here's the construct. Internal versus external. Am I doing this or posting this because I want to or because I think people will like it? Am I doing this because I want to, internal motivation, or because I think people will like it, external validation? Is that what happens is that if we get into that mindset of external validation, we'll be doing that for our entire life, and it's a recipe for anxiety. Because when we try to basically control people's perception of us, we'll never really know. And so it's so important that we get to a place of basing our actions in our social media off of internal motivation. Because if I see a cause that I love and I share that out, it's because I want more people to know about it. If someone wrote an incredible book and it touched my life and I want to share that with people because it's going to help them, that's internal motivation. But again, if I share a picture of me at the beach and my abs look good in the shadows and I want people to see that, that's external validation. That is the simplest construct to help young people evaluate their own sharing habits in a virtuous way.
Amazing. All right. So it doesn't look like the group has any questions today, which is totally okay. I know your schedules are crazy with orientation and ramping up for the school year. So we are going to, I guess, wrap it up unless, Andrew, do you have anything else in closing remarks?
That's it, guys. And one thing that we wanted to do is that if you are still on the chat, if you just go ahead and type your email into the question or email me, we'd love to offer each of you guys a complimentary tribute so that you can create one for your organization, your university. So my email address is andrew@tribute.co. And so for any of you guys that send me an email, we'd be happy to offer you a complimentary tribute so that you can get one of those started for whether it's a student, whether it's an admin who's done amazing work, but we'd love for each of you guys to check out the site and share some love and appreciation with someone who deserves it. But thank you guys all for sticking around today.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Andrew. And for those of you that haven't typed it in, or maybe you're listening in the background, don't have time, we do have a list of everyone that has attended, so I can pass those on to Andrew so he can circle back with you as well.
Okay, so our favorite statistic that you guys will experience if you actually do one of these is something called TOJ. So again, we're over 10,000 of these that have been created now. And one of the statistics we've been tracking since the beginning is TOJ, which stands for Tears of Joy. And I kid you not, since we've been tracking this since day one, over 80%, 8,000 of the people who have received these have told us that they literally cried tears of joy when they watched the video. So if you want a great gift, check it out.
That is phenomenal. Oh my gosh. I'm so looking forward to making mine. So if you guys do want to reach out to Andrew personally, he does have his website. It's andrewhorn.com, or you can follow him on social media at itsandrewhorn. I will post that on the chat when I'm done here. As always, if you haven't yet, be sure to join our Facebook group. It is that green button down there. All of the slides and screenshots that Andrew shared, I will be sure to post there. In terms of the webinars, we are looking for a new topic and some hosts for starting the end of September. We're kind of running out of ideas here, so we want you guys to help us out. So if you have a suggestion for a topic, or if you want to present one yourself, just email info@disrupt.com with 2 T's. Visit our website, send us a message, whatever is easiest for you. And we would love to hear what you'd want us to cover. One more huge thank you to Andrew. He is a new dad, so we really appreciate the time that he's taken out of his crazy busy life right now. And other than that, we wish you guys a very successful orientation if that's happening next week. Otherwise, we'll see you here again next week. Same time, same place. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks.